It all began on a fateful evening in April 1960. A beautiful and talented teacher, known for her kindness and faith, walked into a church for confession. She never walked out. What transpired within those sacred walls would remain a secret for years to come, protected by the very institution meant to offer solace and truth. As the largest search in the region's history unfolded, whispers of suspicion began to circulate. Who could have done such a terrible thing? The answer, it seemed, was hiding in plain sight, wearing the collar of a priest. This is the story of a community torn apart, a family's relentless pursuit of justice, and a case that would challenge the very foundations of faith and trust.
Irene Garza, the former McAllen school teacher and beauty queen, was only 25 years old when her body was found dumped in a drainage ditch.
CBS 4's Imelda Mejia is live from where the saga first began, the church where Garza and her accused killer met.
Join us as we unravel the twisted tale of a crime that shocked a nation and the decades-long journey to bring a killer to account. In the sun-baked landscape of South Texas, where the Rio Grande snakes its way along the U.S.-Mexico border, lies the city of McAllen. This vibrant community, nestled in the heart of the Rio Grande Valley, is known for its warm climate, rich cultural heritage, and close-knit neighborhoods. Back in 1960, McAllen was a growing city of about 33,000 people, a place where everyone seemed to know each other. The streets were lined with palm trees, and the air was often filled with the sweet scent of citrus from nearby orchards. It was a town where people left their doors unlocked and children played freely in the streets until dusk. At the center of the community stood Sacred Heart Church, its tall spire reaching towards the heavens, a beacon of faith for the predominantly Catholic population. The church was more than just a place of worship. It was a gathering spot, a source of comfort, and a pillar of the community. It was here, in this seemingly idyllic setting, that our story unfolds. It was here that a young woman named Irene Garza came to life, and where her life would tragically end. Irene Garza entered the world on November 15, 1934, in the heart of McAllen, Texas. Her parents, Nicholas and Josefina Garza, were hard-working folks who owned a dry cleaning business in town. As their enterprise flourished, the family moved from the south side of McAllen to a more well-to-do area on the north side, a testament to their growing success and the American dream. Irene was a shining star in McAllen, a local girl who had made good. With her beauty, intelligence, and kind heart, she embodied the American dream for many in her community. As the first Latina drum majorette at McAllen High School and former Miss All-South Texas Sweetheart, Irene was admired by many and loved by all who knew her. But Irene was more than just a pretty face. She was a dedicated second-grade teacher working tirelessly to educate and inspire children from less fortunate backgrounds. Her commitment to her faith was unwavering, attending daily mass and participating actively in church activities. Little did anyone know that on a quiet Saturday evening in April 1960, Irene's faith would lead her into the path of evil lurking in the most unexpected place. As she walked up the steps of Sacred Heart Church, seeking spiritual guidance and forgiveness, she had no idea that this would be her final journey. On Saturday, April 16, 1960, Irene told her parents she was heading to Sacred Heart Church for confession. It was the day before Easter Sunday, and many parishioners remembered seeing Irene at the church that evening. Her striking appearance often made her stand out in the congregation. But as the night wore on and Irene didn't return home, her parents began to worry. At first, they thought she might have stayed for the Easter Vigil Mass. But when 3 a.m. came and went with no sign of Irene, they knew something was terribly wrong. They made their way to the McAllen Police Department to report their daughter missing. As the sun rose on Easter Sunday, April 17, 1960, the joy of the holiday was overshadowed by growing concern for Irene Garza's whereabouts. The community, shocked by her disappearance, quickly rallied together to find the beloved teacher. The following day, April 18, brought the first clues in this baffling case. Along a McAllen Road, passers-by stumbled upon a trail of evidence stretching several hundred yards. First, they found Irene's purse. A little further down, her left shoe appeared. Then her delicate lace veil was discovered. These items, scattered like breadcrumbs, only deepened the mystery surrounding Irene's disappearance. News of the discovery spread like wildfire, and soon the largest volunteer search in Rio Grande Valley history was underway. People from all walks of life joined forces, combing through fields, checking abandoned buildings, and scanning the waters of nearby canals. The community's spirit shone through in this time of crisis, but sadly, their efforts initially proved fruitless. As the search continued, bizarre twists began to emerge. A woman called Irene's home, claiming to be the missing teacher. She said she had been taken to a hotel in nearby Hidalgo. Hearts raced with hope, but it was quickly dashed when the call was revealed to be a cruel hoax. In another strange turn, a man in Edinburgh told a waitress he had ended Irene's life, but this too turned out to be a tasteless joke made under the influence of alcohol. These false leads only added to the growing tension and fear gripping McAllen. Where was Irene? What had happened to her? The uncertainty was almost unbearable for her family and friends. Then, on April 21, 5 days after Irene was last seen, the search came to a heartbreaking end. In a canal several miles from where the other evidence was found, searchers made a grim discovery. Irene's body was found, bringing a wave of sorrow and shock to the community. The medical examiner's findings were devastating. Irene had been physically harmed while unconscious, and her passing was caused by suffocation. Her body showed signs of trauma, with bruising over both eyes and on the right side of her face. The canal waters had washed away much of the physical evidence that might have pointed to her attacker. As the news spread, the tight-knit community of McAllen was shaken to its core. How could something so terrible happen to someone so beloved? And more chillingly, who among them could have done such a thing? Law enforcement officials questioned about 500 people across several Texas cities. They cast a wide net, interviewing known offenders, Irene's family members, co-workers, and even her ex-boyfriends. Nearly 50 lie detector tests were administered. In a show of how seriously the community took this case, a reward of $2,500 was offered for information, the largest amount ever posted for such a case in the Rio Grande Valley at that time. Later, South Texas businessmen increased the reward to a staggering $10,000. As the investigation progressed, attention began to focus on an unexpected suspect, the young priest who had heard Irene's last confession, Father John Fate. At 27 years old, Fate had recently completed his seminary training in San Antonio and was new to the McAllen Church. Several peculiar details about Fate's behavior on the night of Irene's disappearance raised eyebrows. Church members reported that his confession line moved unusually slowly that evening. He was also noticed to be away from the sanctuary several times. When the canal was drained days after Irene was found, investigators discovered Fate's photo slide viewer in the water. Even more suspiciously, fellow priests had noticed scratch marks on Fate's hands after the Easter Vigil Mass. They'd also found it odd that Fate had reportedly taken Irene to the church rectory to hear her confession, an unusual practice. As suspicion grew around Father John Fate, investigators dug deeper into his story. At first, Fate denied hearing Irene's confession in the rectory. Later, he changed his tune and admitted to doing so. When asked about his absences from the sanctuary that night, Fate spun a tale about breaking his glasses. According to Fate, he often fidgeted with his spectacles while listening to confessions. On that fateful night, he claimed he'd accidentally broken them. This led him to drive back to the pastoral house for a spare pair. When he'd arrived, he realized he didn't have his key, so he said he had to climb up to the second floor from the outside. This daring feat, he explained, was how he got those mysterious scratches on his hands. But Fate's story didn't quite add up, and there was more trouble brewing. Just 3 weeks before Irene's passing, another young woman named Maria America Guerra had been physically harmed while praying at a different Catholic church nearby. Whispers began to circulate that Fate might have been involved in this incident too. However, but local church leaders weren't keen on entertaining the idea that one of their own could be mixed up in such terrible acts. They discouraged people from even considering the possibility. Despite this, Fite was eventually charged in connection with the attack on Guerra. The trial for the Guerra case ended in a hung jury. Rather than face a second trial, Fite made a deal in 1962. He entered a plea of no contest to a lesser charge and paid a $500 fine. Years later, Fite would claim he didn't understand that this plea would count as a conviction. After these legal troubles, the church whisked Fite away to Assumption Abbey, a monastery in Missouri. There, an interesting conversation took place. The abbot told a monk named Dale Tacheny that Fite had ended someone's life and asked Tacheny to counsel him for a few months. During these counseling sessions, Tacheny said Fite admitted to hurting one young lady and ending the life of another. But Tacheny, following the instructions he was given, didn't report this information to the authorities. This secret would stay buried for many years. Fite didn't settle well into monastery life, so he was sent to a retreat for troubled priests in New Mexico. There, he joined the staff and worked his way up to a supervisory role. In a twist of fate, Fite even cleared another priest with a troubling past for placement in a new parish. As the years rolled by, Fite left the priesthood in the 1970s. He got married, moved to Arizona, and started a family. For 17 years, he worked as a volunteer at a food charity, seemingly leaving his past behind. But secrets have a way of surfacing. In 2002, after carrying the weight of Fite's confession for decades, Tacheny decided he couldn't keep quiet any longer. He reached out to authorities, thinking the incident had happened in San Antonio, where Fite had trained. This call reopened the investigation into Irene's case. Texas Ranger Rudy Jaramillo started digging. He spoke with Father Joseph O'Brien, who had worked with Fite back in 1960. While O'Brien had previously denied knowing anything about the case, he now admitted to Jaramillo that Fite had confessed shortly after the incident. Despite these new revelations, the case hit another roadblock. Irene Garza, the district attorney of Hidalgo County, was reluctant to pursue it. He criticized the early police work, questioned O'Brien's mental state, and pointed out the lack of physical evidence. It wasn't until 2004 that Guerra finally brought the case before a grand jury, but Tacheny, O'Brien, and Fite weren't called to testify. The grand jury declined to indict Fite. Guerra's handling of the case frustrated Irene's family and many in the community. His comment, "Why would anyone be haunted by her death? She died. Her killer got away," sparked outrage and disbelief. But the story wasn't over yet. In 2014, a new chapter began when District Court Judge Ricardo Rodriguez campaigned to replace Guerra as district attorney. The Garza case became a key issue in the campaign. Rodriguez promised to take a fresh look at the evidence if elected. In 2015, Ricardo Rodriguez took office as the new district attorney of Hidalgo County. True to his word, he announced in April that the Garza case was being reopened. This news brought a glimmer of hope to those who had been waiting for justice for over half a century. The breakthrough came in February 2016. In a quiet neighborhood in Scottsdale, Arizona, law enforcement officers knocked on the door of an 83-year-old man. John Fite, now elderly and using a walker, was taken into custody. The former priest who had long been suspected in Irene's case was finally facing charges. Fite's arrest sent shockwaves through both Arizona and Texas. How could a man who had lived a seemingly normal life for decades be connected to such a terrible event from the past? As Fite was extradited to Texas, the eyes of the nation turned to the upcoming trial. In the courtroom, Fite pleaded not guilty. His defense team argued for a low bond, citing his advanced age and health issues, including stage 3 kidney and bladder cancer. But Judge Louis Singletary wasn't swayed. He set the bond at a hopping $1 million, underscoring the seriousness of the charges. As the trial preparations got underway, Fite's defense team tried to move the trial out of Hidalgo County. They argued that their client couldn't get a fair trial there due to all the media attention. They even filed a 700-page document claiming that reporters had already decided Fite was responsible and that he'd avoided facing consequences for years only because the church had protected him. But Judge Singletary wasn't convinced. After careful consideration, he denied the request for a change of venue. The trial would proceed in Hidalgo County, where the events had unfolded all those years ago. The trial itself was a tense affair. Prosecutors painted a picture of a young priest who had taken advantage of his position of trust. They brought forward witnesses who spoke about Feight's suspicious behavior around the time of Irene's disappearance. One of the key witnesses was Dale Tacheny, the former monk who had counseled Feight years ago. Tacheny testified that Feight had admitted to him about hurting a young woman. His testimony, given in a closed deposition due to his age and unique knowledge of the case, was crucial to the prosecution's case. The defense, on the other hand, argued that there was no physical evidence linking Feight to the crime. It pointed out the many years that had passed and questioned the reliability of memories from so long ago. As the trial progressed, the courtroom was filled with tension. Irene's family members, who had waited so long for this moment, watched with bated breath. The community of McAllen, still haunted by the events of 1960, waited anxiously for a resolution. Finally, on December 7, 2017, after all the evidence had been presented and all the arguments had been made, the jury reached a verdict. John Feight was found responsible for Irene Garza's passing. The courtroom erupted in emotion as the verdict was read. After 57 years, justice had finally been served. But the story wasn't quite over yet. The sentencing phase was still to come. Feight's defense attorney, citing his client's lack of wrongdoing since 1960, asked for probation. The prosecution, on the other hand, requested a symbolic sentence of 57 years, 1 year for each year that had passed since Irene's life was taken. In the end, the jury decided on an even stronger message. On December 8, 2017, John Feight was sentenced to life in prison. At 85 years old, it was effectively a life sentence. As Feight was led away to begin his sentence at the W.J. Estelle unit near Huntsville, Texas, a chapter of McAllen's history finally came to a close. The long shadow cast by the events of that Easter weekend in 1960 had finally begun to lift. Irene Garza's family, while still mourning her loss, found some measure of peace in the verdict. The community of McAllen could finally begin to heal from a wound that had been open for nearly 6 decades. The conclusion of this decades-long case brought a mix of emotions to everyone involved. For Irene's family, it was a bittersweet moment. While they finally had answers and a sense of justice, it couldn't bring back the vibrant young woman they had lost so many years ago. Irene's cousin, Linda de la Vina, spoke to reporters after the trial. With tears in her eyes, she said, "We've been waiting for this day for 57 years. This is a big victory for a lot of people in South Texas. As we reflect on this case, we're reminded of the impact one life can have, even long after it's gone. Irene Garza's story touched countless lives, sparked important conversations, and ultimately led to changes in how similar cases are handled. While we can't change the past, cases like Irene's remind us of the importance of standing up for truth, supporting victims and their families, and never giving up in the pursuit of justice. Her story will continue to be told, serving as a powerful reminder that every life is precious and deserves to be honored and protected. In the end, the resolution of Irene Garza's case isn't just about punishing wrongdoing. It's about remembering a young woman who touched many lives, acknowledging the pain her loss caused, and reaffirming our commitment to creating a world where such tragedies are less likely to occur. Irene Garza may have left this world too soon, but her impact continues to ripple through time, touching lives and inspiring change. In that way, her spirit lives on, a beacon of hope and a call for justice that will never be silenced.